I'm going to cut through the bullshit here. It's a 57 with a different case. If you're going to get SM7Bs, they're for talking in too close, right? Don't get an SM7B and then put it up over there. I realise I'm sitting here doing this now. But hello and welcome to this video. I enjoyed doing the tier list video of all my audio gear so much in the last video that I thought in this one I would do all the microphones that I've ever used for any length of time. Most of them I've owned, but some of them I've used in other studios or used with bands where they've not been my property, but I've used them enough that I think I can rank them. So let's do a microphone tier list. Have a swig of tea. Barry's tea, of course. First is AKG D12. Now I've used one of these new ones, the AKG D12 VR, and whatever the blue setting is on it is absolutely amazing. Yeah, I think that is a stunning bass drum mic. It hardly needs any EQ. I would usually use this sort of slightly outside, not so much inside the bass drum, but either. It's just an amazing bass drum mic. Hasn't quite got the wow factor of another one I'm thinking of, but we'll get to that. I'm going to put that in the A tier. So just to explain, the S tier is like sort of superb. That's the best tier you can get. The A tier basically means that the mic is not only great, but it's got a wow factor to it. You know, maybe not superb, but it's got that wow factor to it. The B level is basically industry standard, perfectly good, doesn't necessarily have the wow factor, but is a perfectly professional item, in this case microphone. The C tier is pretty good, usable, not quite sort of industry standard or not quite something that I would say is as, you know, the best thing I go for, but certainly usable. D tier is emergencies only. It's that mic that you think, oh, do I have to use that? Well, I'll just whack that on that because I need to mic it and I haven't got anything else. And the F tier basically is that it just is not fit for purpose in any way, shape or form. You wouldn't use that ever in any kind of job whatsoever. So they're the rankings, and I'm putting the D12 in the A rank. Right, on to the next one. Now we understand that. The AKG C418, it's a little tom mic, and I've got 4 of these. And they sound pretty good. I wouldn't say they're A tier, but I would put them in C tier. They're pretty good. I mean, they're not the thing that I'd go for the best tom sound. I'm going to put them in C tier. It's kind of low B, top C, but let's see how we go. The next one is a Sennheiser E835. I've got one of these. My friend Chris has one of these. He did a load of vocals when we were doing stuff during the lockdown. He used this as his main vocal mic because that's what he had at home. It's pretty decent. You know, he can sing well, so what he was giving me was perfectly usable. Would I have preferred something better? Yeah, definitely would. But 58 is better, you know, 57 is better, 57 Beta is better, so that's got to go C tier for me. That's got to go C tier. It's not something I'd ever grab first, but it's still sort of perfectly usable. The next we have Beta 57A. Right, I've got a few of these and they're really, really nice. Great for miking guitar amps, great for snare drums, toms, anything like that. Vocals, live, in fact, if I've gone and done a small gig helping out a friend or something and I've needed to sing, I like that on my vocals live. I think it sounds great. I sent one up to my friend Ricky. He did a load of vocals with it and acoustic guitar and it sounded great. So yeah, that's definitely one I would grab before anything else. Now, because of the Shure reputation, you could put it in A and could even put it in S tier. But I wouldn't say it's got the wow factor. It just does everything really well. So for that reason, I'm putting it B tier. It's very much top of B tier, but it's a B tier mic. That doesn't mean it's bad, right? That means it's perfectly acceptable industry standard, does its job perfectly. You know, it just doesn't have that wow factor or that everyone drops their jaw at it. Right, so let's move on. AKG C1000S. I had 2 of these at one point at Rogue Studios, and they were all right. They were never as good as some other things I had. I'd sometimes put them on a hi-hat. I'd sometimes use them as, I don't really know, room mics maybe. I tried them on overheads, but I preferred other things. I'm going to put that as a C-tier mic. It's not the first thing I'd go for, but it's usable. 414. Now, I've used the older ones. They all look the same, but I know there's some newer models out now, but the ones I'm talking about are from sort of the 90s and the 2000s and whatever. But regardless, it's an AKG C414. They're really good microphones, but they've got a hell of a lot of colour. And sometimes for drums, for cymbals, for stuff like that, they can just sound really harsh. Not something that I'd pick first, but still very good. I'd never complain about having them. I'm going to put that as a B tier mic. Not my personal favourite, but I'm not putting it in the C tier category. I'd still pick that first over a lot of things. So yeah, the Beyerdynamic M88. I only have one of these, and it sounds really cool, particularly if you're looking for certain vintage sounds. I've done some vocals with it, brass, saxophone. Really, really nice for that. I'm going to put that in the B tier. Next up, this is a blast from the past. Shure Unidyne B 5155A. God, I had some of these when I was really young. I don't know whether I got them from school or bought them off someone. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember. I don't remember exactly what they sound like, but it sounded pretty bloody awful. But what I was doing with them was probably wrong. I mean, I used them loads when I was young, but I didn't know what I was doing. I'm going to emergency only from what I remember. That's based on my memory, of course. Next, the Neumann KM184. Now, these are beautiful. I don't own a pair of these, but I have done plenty of recordings that I've ended up mixing where I've used these as overheads, ride mics, hi-hat mics, spot mics, stereo pair for an acoustic guitar. They do sound really good. I'm putting them in the A tier. They're not quite total jaw-dropping, but they're definitely absolute leaders in their field. So yeah, A tier for them. Let's have some tea. Next up, we have the T-Bone CD56, which is like a tom mic. Suppose you could use it on the snare. Is that another? That's the beta version. That's the black version of it. Yeah, I've used many of these in my time, and they're all right. They're not great. I've done plenty of things where I've recorded a function band, and that's been their drum mic set, and I've sort of basically taken the multi-track live and had to go home and mix it, and I have to do a lot of EQ on them. They're not unusable. I wouldn't even say they're D-list. Emergency only. I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm going to put them emergency only. I'd never buy them. I'd never want them. So yeah, that's going emergency only. Next up, we have Neumann TLM103. This is an excellent microphone. This is an absolutely brilliant microphone. I had one of these at Rogue Studios, London. Almost all the vocals I recorded were with that, and I would generally also have it on electric guitar on the guitar cab, along with a 57 or something else. Wonderful as a drum mic as well. I only had one, so I never used it as a stereo pair, but it sounded absolutely brilliant. A fantastic mic. That's going in the A tier. I'm putting in the A tier because there's some things that are going to go in the S tier, and then you'll see why that's in the A tier, but something very close to it's going to be in the A tier soon. Next up is the Neumann KMS105, a condenser vocal mic by Neumann, and I really like the sound of this, particularly on quiet singers. I've not used it as much as I've used other mics, but when I've mixed things where, particularly live performances where they've used this mic, I've always been able to handle the background noise nicely. It's not that the background noise is less than a dynamic in some ways, some bits of it are more, but it sounds more pleasant, and you can get it to fit in the mix a lot better. It's a really good mic, particularly I'd say female vocals or quiet vocals, sort of men that sort of whisper sing and whatever. It really works for bringing out the top end detail in a way that I think a 58 or something wouldn't. I'm putting that in the A tier for my tastes. Next up, an LD Systems D1120. So many years ago at the studio, we had a deal, a trade account with a company, I think it was Adam Hall, who were the distributors for LD Systems. They probably still are. I bought some of their DI boxes that were perfectly good, perfectly usable. Should have put that in my last tier list video, the LD Systems DI boxes. Oh, I'm forgetting things, aren't I? Anyway, I basically tried them out because they were so cheap that it'd be almost rude not to. There are some of the LD Systems mics that I actually liked. This one though, this was a valve mic. It came with a little sort of power supply and big hefty cable, and was meant to do all this kind of magic, meant to be like the cheap Chinese valve mic to end the proper valve mic market. And I'll be honest with you, it was pretty rubbish. I mean, it wasn't so bad that it was unusable, but it had no top end at all. It just was kind of, it's really muddy in the low mids. It needed a lot of EQ to make it sound good. I got recordings of my own voice that I did on it. Yeah, it's not something I liked at all. So that's an emergency only mic. That's a D tier mic in my opinion. That was not a good mic. Talking of mics that aren't very good, the Samson Q-Kick. Now, this is a mic again that I've used with function bands and some drummers that I've worked with that kind of have their own drum mic set, and you turn up to a pub gig or something back in the day. I haven't done it for a while, but we'd turn up and they'd have those mics. And if I was ever doing a live recording, again, it was mostly live recording with this thing, I think there was one recording where I wanted a mic inside and that's all they had. It wasn't a live recording, and basically the only thing it was usable for was to get a transient to, you know, do a trigger. It's one of the worst bass drum mics I think I've ever heard. So that is going to go into the F. That's a complete fail. I mean, I could put it in emergencies only because at least I can get the transient to trigger, but then I'm not really using the microphone as a microphone. So as a microphone, it's absolutely fucking useless. So let's move on. The LD Systems D1121, which is the non-valve version of their kind of large capsule condenser. It's kind of meant to be a bit U87 like, and I actually really like these. I bought two of them initially, and I really like these enough to buy another two. I think they were only sort of, to me, probably about 110 quid each, which was incredibly cheap for what they are back in 2003, 2004, something like that. I can't remember exactly. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, the Chinese stuff's not going to sound as good and the manufacturing won't be as good and whatever. Do you know what? I mean, I've had them for 21, maybe 22 years, and 3 out of the 4 of them are still working. And I've used that on guitar amps. I've used them for room mics. I've used them for drum overheads. There are vocals on this channel for songs that people download the multitrack and mix that you've mixed that have been sung into that. There's drum files you've mixed where the room mics or the overheads or whatever are those mics, and I think they sound pretty good, particularly compared to what was on the market at the time, which was like the original Rode NT2s and the original Rode NT1. They were just under that price range, and they certainly weren't anywhere, you know, close to being worse. In some cases, because of the polar pattern positions and the high pass, they were actually better. They don't make them anymore, but I've still got 3 of them, and I would not turn my nose up at them. In fact, the Dark Side of the Moon video, which we put out with Ozzy Floyd, the front of house pair of mics that I used to capture the sound of the band in the room and all the applause and stuff was actually 2 of those in Glasgow Hydro Arena. So saying that, if I had better things, 2 Neumanns, you know, of course I'm going to use 2 Neumanns over those, but they're perfectly usable. They're not emergency only, so I'm putting them in the C tier. Okay, Neumann TLM102. I've got a couple of these still to this day. They are fantastic microphones. I use them loads. I used to use them all the time for anything I did to camera. I'd have my TLM102 up as one of my microphones. What can I say about this is the size of them. They're so small compared to the TLM103, yet they sound almost the same. In some ways better. They're kind of more rounded on the bottom end, and they've got 20 dB more headroom. I've used them to record snare drum. I've used them sort of outside of bass drum. I've used them as like a sausage mic, the Verst mic. I've used it as a central overhead. I've used 2 of them for the Glyn Johns mics. Brass guitar amps, they sound absolutely amazing on guitar amps. They're great on acoustic guitars, and just having that 20 dB more headroom and how small they are, it just makes them better than the TLM103. So that is my first S tier mic. It's basically a TLM103, but to me just so much more scope for use. And there are people out there saying that they're noisier and you can't use them because they've got too much of a noise floor. I've never found that at all, because I've had both a 103 and I've got 2 102s still. And part of the reason that I've got 2 102s rather than a couple of 103s or something is just because I can do everything that I'd want to do with the 103. I feel that I can do with the 102, but I can do more with the 102, and it's a beautiful sounding mic in such a small package, and they're really resilient to damage as well. I mean, I take one of those around with a little sock thing over the top of it in a sort of like a pencil case type thing in my rucksack, just for if I'm doing something in a hotel room. And man, they just work and work. I've been doing that for years. There's no damage to it at all. With the best will in the world, if I'd done that with those LD Systems mics, or even an AKG 414, I mean, I've seen so many AKG 414 die because they're not built anywhere near as well as the 102 or the 103. But the 102 is just, what a great mic. Anyway, next microphone, cup of tea as well. LD Systems D1122. So I bought 2 of these when I've bought the first 2 of the D1121 or 1120, whatever it was. And yeah, I wasn't anywhere close to as impressed by these as I was the bigger ones. The top end is not on there. They don't sound great for vocals. I have had people send me vocals where they've used these mics when they actually had one themselves, and they, it's EQable, but it's not fantastic. The thing that I do like about them is the pad on them, and I actually think they sound really nice on toms. If you've got one of those drummers where they've got sort of a 13 and a 16 or an 18 flat toms, and the cymbals are quite high up, so you're not getting loads of cymbal bleed or snare bleed over the toms, and you can get one of those mics quite sort of over without them whacking it. When I've had those sort of Bonham style drummers, I've used the pair of those on toms, and they do actually sound nice for that, because I do like condensers on toms and snares, to be honest. But not what I've reached to first, except in that one particular situation. So I'm going to put that in a D list, because it's kind of emergency only for most things, with a very, very narrow example. But I'm going to put it top of the D list, and I'm going to move the that awful mic I was a kid a bit further up. I think that's right order on that, the right order on that. In fact, I'm going to do that with those, so that looks good. And on the A list, I'm going to put the 103 the top of the A, and then for me, yeah, that seems about the right order for those. Okay, so next, who has not had a Rode NT1A. It's kind of like by now the industry standard cheap condenser, but it sounds great. I've used these loads on as drum overheads mainly and room mics. I don't particularly like them on vocals. I think there's some detail that's missing, but with the loud stuff, with drums and whatever, I think they can sound really good. And for the price, they're really, really good. But they're certainly not the first thing I'd go for. I'm C or B tier. It's got to be C tier. I'd use them, but if there was something better, I'd rather use that. But they are good. Kind of contradicting myself there, but I can't put them in B tier. Okay, so next up is the Electronics SE7s. These are a recent thing that I've got into. Wow. Them and the SE8s both sound amazing. There was something about the SE7s, they're so much cheaper than the SE8s. And they're 98% as good. And I've only ever used them for drums in a Glyn Johns pair. But that convinced me that I need to buy a pair. So I am going to buy a pair. And I would actually reach for them first. So I'm going to put these in the B category because I would reach for them over other mics. They wouldn't be, when I've run out of what I want to use, then I kind of go to the C category. No, they are really good. So next, the Neumann U47 FET. A friend of mine has this microphone and I had it for several months before he took possession of it because it was sent to me because I was nearer than he was post-wise. I used it quite a bit and I used it in conjunction with other mics to see what sounded better, and I'll come back to that later when we get to those mics. I did not like it. I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it, and maybe I wasn't using it right. I mean, I can't see how I wasn't using it right, but it just did not sound good. Now, I don't know whether that's his one, but it just sounded dull. I don't know, I just did not like it. But it's perfectly usable, and it's certainly not D-list. It's certainly not emergency only. And I'm going to be smashed about for hating this mic and not even putting it B tier. But I'm putting that C tier because that is not a mic that I'd ever pick first. Maybe I need more time with it, but I had it for like 3 or 4 months. I recorded drums as a center mic. I recorded vocals. I recorded acoustic guitar with it. And I did not like it. And I even did A/B tests from my friend. I even had it with another microphone and was talking into both of them and sent him the files, and then we put them over the top of a drum kit, sort of over the snare as a central overhead, and I recorded that and another mic very, very close together, and it just got blown out the water by a mic that's, you know, 6 times less expensive. So yeah, C tier for me, sorry. DPA 4018. Okay, well, I hate this microphone. And I know 2 other people in the band that absolutely love it, and it solved all their vocal problems having one of those, but we don't use them anymore. But for me, singing into this live, and I did it for quite a while, either with in-ear monitors or with wedges, it's just like it's a black hole of sound. It's like it's almost like it's got a resonance suppressor over it. So when you're trying to sing something and you're hearing the note and feeling the note, it's almost like all of the life is just being notched out, and it doesn't matter how much you turn it up, it's just turning up all the stuff that's just dead and boring. And I really hate this microphone. I mean, it's not unusable, but it's not good for me. Now, I know other people, many other people, that love this microphone. I mean, it's 869 quid for something that I think a 58 or a 57 or many other mics. I even prefer that Sennheiser mic to this. This is, in my opinion, not a good mic at all. I cannot stand it. I went to see a Simon and Garfunkel tribute, and they were using them as well as their main vocal mics, either that or the slightly cheaper model. And again, it just felt like all the life was missing from the vocal. And it doesn't matter how much you turn the vocal up, it will never feel like it's sitting in the right place in the mix. It was just fucking horrible. So I'm putting that in the emergency only category, despite how much they seem to be loved by a lot of people. I cannot stand them at all. Now, Shure SM57, totally different kettle of fish. I've got loads of these, and I've had even more. Mainstay at the studio. If you didn't know what mic to use a 57. And you can never go wrong or be fired for recording something with a 57. I could record an entire session with a rock band from every single drum mic. Bass drum I'd struggle a tiny bit, but even there I'd get round it. Everything could be done with a 57. Vocals, guitars, drums, overheads, the room mics, the lot. It could all be done with 57s. They are absolutely amazing. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I'm not putting it in the S tier because in itself, it's an amazing mic because it does so much. But I don't think it does any one of those things with the wow factor that means it needs to be in the S tier. But it is top of the A tier. Let's put it top of the A tier because that is that's the all-rounder to end all all-rounders. Shure Beta 52A bass drum mic. I don't like this thing. It's not the worst bass drum mic in the world, but I have to do a fair amount of EQ anytime I mix anything that's been recorded with this. Yeah, not my cup of tea really. That is a C tier microphone. It wouldn't be my first choice. It's usable, but it wouldn't be my first choice. Okay, next is the T-Bone BD300, their bass drum mic, which is marginally better than their tom mics. In fact, it is a fair amount better than their tom mics, but still not fantastic. Cheap bass drum mic. Certainly not D tier. It's not as bad as that, but it's definitely never going to be my first choice. I'd put it in league with the Shure. I'd say both of them I don't really like. SM58, the Shure SM58 needs no introduction. I mean, that is just a variation on the SM57 to me. It's 58s, 57s. They do sound different, but you can kind of EQ one to sound like the other, and you can use them interchangeably if you're sensible. The amount of times that back in the day, if I wanted to use a 57 somewhere and I only had a 58, I'd take the top off it and whack it on a tom or something if I ran out of 57s, and you could barely tell that much difference by the time you've kind of EQ'd it and compressed it and whatever like that. I'm putting that again in the A category, second after the 57. Everything can be done better with something else than a 58, but the 58 will get you, if the 57 will get you 95% of the way there with every instrument, then the 58 will get you 93% of the way there with every instrument. It's better for vocals, but still 57 sound great for vocals. The Rode Wireless Go and their microphone, their lav mics. I'm not talking about the new ones, I've never had those. I'm talking about the old ones, the original ones. I'm not going to be reviewing the transmission and receiving part of this because that's not actually the microphone. Although that does work really, really well. I've only ever had one situation where it dropped out on me, and I've used these a hell of a lot. But the actual microphone that's in them is absolutely fucking horrible. I wouldn't say it's unused. Well, it's D tier. It's an emergency only. Using the actual built-in mic on that is emergency only, so I'm putting that in D tier. The Sennheiser E604 tom mics, I've used these loads. I've never owned any of them. I wouldn't mind getting 4 of them because they're always useful to have. I do quite like these. These are not first choice, but they're cheap enough that you want a few around for situations. If I'm buying nice posh mics that I'd use on toms, I'd probably buy 2 or 3 of them. The moment the drummer's got 4 toms, I'm more likely to put mics like the ones in the C tier on each tom, and then maybe use condensers or something further away and get them sort of 2 and 2, and then I'll use a blend of both. I've done that before because I think the moment you start trying to get 4 big mics around the kit, you can sort of get in the way. They you know, and also the toms tend to start a lot smaller. You start to get like 10, 12, 14, 16 or something like that, and trying to get a really big mic over a 10-inch tom Usually if someone's using 10-inch toms, then their cymbals are all really near as well, you know, and I speak from experience there. So these kind of mics, they really do help when you've got like 4 toms and you just need a solid mic to use. I mean, that's why I've got these these ones, for the same reason. I will put them in the C tier because they're not my first choice, but if I've got 4 toms, then they probably would be. So I'm putting them fairly high up in the probably in front of the AKGs. So they're kind of top of C tier, bottom of B tier. I'm going to move the SE7s actually up a bit there, because I'd rather use the SE7s over the 414s. So next up is the T-Bone RB500. These are ribbon mics. These are cheap ribbon mics, £88, which is about sort of just over $100 or 100 euros. Now, there are songs on this channel that you've heard me mix where the front pair of mics, if you've downloaded again, the front pair of mics, which are a mid-side pair, were recorded with a pair of these mics. And I think they sound pretty bloody good. I've slagged off all the T-Bone stuff so far. Results speak. And I've always loved that front pair of drum mics. And when I was talking to John Paul the other day on the phone, because I've done a few sessions at his old studio now, when I was talking to him on the phone the other day, he reminded me that the front pair of those mics are the cheap T-Bone ribbon mics. And it doesn't matter where I've used them, I've always liked them. I always thought they sounded really good. I can't speak on resilience, but the fact that he had the studio for over 10 years out there and they never broke suggests that they were perfectly usable. And I probably would go for them first, just based on the fact that they sounded so good. I was so surprised that such a cheap mic sounds so good, but they really, really do sound good. I mean, if you watch my mixing drums video from not that long ago, and I'm bringing up the front pair and hearing how much that represents the real kit sound in the room, that's a pair of those mics. So I'm putting them B tier. Let's look at the next one. Right, I've got an Audio Technica tom mic here. I've used them a few times with decent live acts actually that have used these, and they sound all right actually. I'd put them in the same league as these guys, the C tier. They wouldn't be my first choice for recording in a studio. Live I'd put them at B tier, but in the studio I'm going to put them at C tier. But yeah, pretty good those mics actually. I'll put them there. Next up is the AKG Solidtube microphone. I've used one of these at John Paul's studio in Germany quite a bit, done my vocals and other people's vocals on this microphone, and I think it sounds pretty damn good actually. I've never had a problem. John Paul thinks his is broken and it's actually a little bit more drivey than other ones he's tried. So he seems to think that it's a little bit faulty and that's why it sounds so colourful and nice. I'm not going to put it in the A tier, but it's definitely B tier. Bring it down to somewhere around there. I mean, for vocals I'd rather use it than the 414, but the 414's got more applications with drums and other things. So yeah, I'm going to bring it down to somewhere around there. So this is the Samson Q-Tom, and these are fairly bad. These are emergency only microphones in my opinion. Absolutely emergency only. They're not as bad as the bass drum mic that's part of that set, but they are bad sounding microphones. Next, the Neumann U87. Well, obviously this is rubbish. What am I talking about? This is amazing. This is a wow mic. This is, I don't know about the new AI ones. I've never actually used those. The ones that I've used are sort of 80s, 90s, noughties. But wow, what a microphone. You're never going to get fired using one of those. That is going up there in the S tier. And you know, I'm going to put it behind the TLM102, because the TLM102, for the fact that it's smaller, It sounds amazing and can do stuff that's a higher sound pressure level, and also I think the build quality of it's better. I've seen U87s break, and I've touched the grill and thought, oh, I've dented that. You know, that's not the build quality of the U87. The U87s I've used has not been as good, but wow, what a microphone! Drum overheads, guitar amps, vocals, you name it. It sounds great. Acoustic guitars, I love it. So yeah, that is a really good microphone. Obviously, it's a Neumann U87. AKG C3000B. I had a pair of these at one point. I cannot remember when. I didn't use them that much. I didn't overly like them. They were sort of the last thing I'd grab, but they were never disappointing. But they weren't the best thing I'd ever used. Saying that, they're better than these bass drum mics, or the even better for me than the U47. No, I mean that's hard to say. I'm going to move that up a little bit there. I'm being a bit harsh with the U47, but yeah, this to me will probably, I'd use it over an NT1. I'd rather use any of these mics over one of those. So yeah, I'm putting that C tier. The AKG SE300B with the CK91 head. So this was a mic where you got the CK91 head, you could get interchangeable different heads and put them on the body. I used these at the studio for years as my main overheads, really. Or ride mics, spot mics, anything like that. Probably recorded a fair amount of acoustic guitar through it. Never did anything like vocals or anything like that, but for overheads and acoustic guitar, I used them a fair amount, and I was never disappointed with them. I never thought, oh, it's a shame I've got to use them. So I'm putting them in B tier because I never found them bad. And whenever I bring up signals now from those sessions where I used those, I'm actually surprised sometimes. I went through some photos and I found a photo of a drum kit with those mics over the top, and I thought, wow, it was those over the top. I assumed it was like a pair of NT2s or the LD Systems mics or something like that, or the Neumann TLM103s or whatever, but no, it was those overheads, those pencils overheads, and they sounded pretty good. I mean, they're not wow factor, but they're pretty good. So they're, no one's going to complain about that. So they are going in the B tier, a little bit above. I'm going to put them just below the 414 and just above the Solidtube for me. Beta 58. It's a 58 with some changes. If you like the 58, you like the Beta 58. I wouldn't say it's an A tier mic. It's like the 57 and the 58s are. Some people would. Am I being harsh on the Beta 57? Because in some ways I actually prefer the Beta 57 on certain things over the 57, like on guitar amps and vocals. I prefer the Beta 57 to just a normal 57, but on drums I don't. I've recorded plenty of snare with the Beta 57 and then wish I'd done it with a real normal 57. Right, I'm going to put this up here around there, but I'm going to move this up, the Beta 57, up to the end of the A category. So I'm changing my mind on that. It's my list, I'm allowed to do that. Audix D6. This just made my jaw drop. Put that inside a bass drum. Talkback mic. Bass drum, please. Doom, doom. Wow, don't even have to EQ it. It just sounds amazing. Get the position right. It just sounds amazing. Best bass drum mic I've ever heard. Yeah, that's going the S tier for me. That was jaw-dropping. That solved all my... That and the D12 on the outside. The only reason the D12's not in S tier is because the Audix D6 is better. Out of the two of them, I prefer the Audix one inside the bass drum and the D12 in the hole. You could do perfectly well swapping them around, but I find I need less EQ that way round. But they are a great pair of microphones. Unlike this one here, which was the industry standard for years, I think this was in the bass drum of every single bass drum I recorded at Rogue Studios and many recordings since. And it's like torture. Listening to a bass drum unprocessed from that microphone just makes me feel ill. It sounds bad. I don't like the sound. You have to do so much EQ, so much work on them that why not just get a microphone that does the job better? Saying that, you can EQ them. All the data is there. You can EQ them, get what you want. I've used them on the bottom of a Hammond, or should I say the Leslie speaker of a Hammond. I've used them on the bottom of the Leslie. On bass amps, I've used them on floor toms. They really do actually shine everywhere that's not a bass drum. So it's a C-tier mic. You should have one. I've actually got 3 of them for some reason. I don't know how I've ended up with 3 of a mic I don't like. But it's a C-tier mic. I'd never pick it first for anything, with the exception of things like bottom of Hammond and then occasionally floor tom. The Coles mic, the classic Coles overhead ribbon mic 4038. I've never owned a pair of these. I've used them in a couple of other studios, and I've always put up other mics that I wanted, and the person in the studio or the drummer has always said, can we put up the Coles mics as well? You're going to love them. And I never have. And I've heard interviews. There was an interview with Steve Albini talking about it. He said, before you listen to them, you've just got to put 10 dB of sort of 10K top end on them. And I'm thinking to myself, why use a mic that you've got to put that much top end on them? You can just get a mic that's already got the top end on it. I do not get it. And what am I missing? I just don't think they sound nice. I put a couple of those over a kit, and then I had the TLM102s as a Glyn Johns pair, and I know they're in different positions and blah blah blah, but I've positioned those Neumanns around so much that I know the difference. And the Coles just did nothing for me at all. I just had them muted all the way through the session. There was another session where I had a singular Coles centre room mic, and I had my 2 Neumann TLM102s as a spaced pair. The 102 sounded amazing in the same position that the Coles were in last time, and the Coles, being the kind of centre mic that was meant to be getting all this depth, I just didn't end up using it at all. Could I use them if they were the only mics left? Yeah, they're not D-list, they're not sort of emergency only, but to me they're C-list microphones, and I know I'm going to get called out for being an absolute idiot for that, but fuck it, I don't like them. I'm going to put them just below those LD Systems mics, which actually I'd rather use every time on as a pair of overheads or a pair of room mics than the Coles. So yeah, sorry about that. The Rode K2, what a fabulous mic this is. It's just a great sounding microphone. I've had that mic up against a whole array of other mics and had vocalists come around when I'm picking what mic to use, and I've had it up against Neumann TLM103. I've had it up against the 102, which I'm still saying is an absolute superb god tier mic. But that's because it's all round and the size and everything. This is a pain in the arse, this mic, because of the power supply and the lead and the big case and all of that stuff. But if you're in a permanent situation where you can set up where you can have it set up and cover it so you're not getting dust in it and whatever, it's really usable. It's not something you can just sling up quickly like the 102. If you're like, I've got an idea, grab a mic, it's a bit more fiddly than that. But wow, what a sound. When I was doing Melly's vocals, we tried out that and the Neumann, I think another one I can't remember, and that just sounded amazing. There's all the colour and all the saturation that you then don't have to put in using either plugins or other outboard. I don't even feel the need to use nice colourful preamps as much with this, because the signal that's coming out of it just sounds like it's got enough colour to do everything. And I'll tell you where it really shines. Centre mic in front of a kit, quite low down, sort of top of bass drum height, but metre or so back. Centre overhead, or a pair of them as overheads, and I've never done a pair of them as overheads, but I've heard someone else do it because I've only got one of these, but I've used it as a central overhead and then used the 102s as a spaced pair, and that as a centre overhead, That was the mic that I was comparing with the U47, and I was doing the vocals, acoustic guitar and kit mic for a central overhead over the top and sending them to John Paul as a blind test. And he got excited and he said, I need to buy a pair of K2s. They just piss all over the Neumann that he just spent £3 and a bit grand on. So for the money as well, I mean, forget the money, they sound great. The K2 bundle there is 588 with the pop shield. I think when I bought it, it was about £600, something like that. But wow, what a microphone. Just not the sort of thing you're going to leave lying around because of the power supply and the heavy duty lead and all of that. It's not something you grab. That's what I like about the 102s and some of the others, that you can just sort of grab them, plug them in and do something quick with them. It's not something I'd travel on the road with. You can't carry it in your rucksack. But that is an S-tier mic. The sound of that is amazing. I'm going to put that just behind the U87. What a mic. Audio Technica ATM 250. Sorry for my giggle there, I'm childish. Does the job. Pretty decent sort of bass drum, and I've used it on other lower, what was it? I think I've used it on trombone before, baritone saxophone. It's a decent mic. It's a B tier mic. Next, AKG D40. I don't own any of these, but we use quite a few of these with Ozzy Floyd. And if you haven't been and checked out our recent Dark Side of the Moon video, that was mixed in here and edited in here with all the cameras. In fact, the camera that you're looking at me through now was used on that shoot. But the mix of that, I'm really proud of the mix. That I'm really proud of the video as well. But the mix and that, I think the toms sound fantastic. And the toms are actually with these mics, I believe. And the saxophone in Us and Them is with one of these mics. Possibly the snare as well. I'll be honest with you, possibly the snare is a D40. I think. I mean, it's a couple of years ago. I'm not sure we're still using these now. They sound great. It was 5 toms round the kit and a snare. 5 bloody toms, eh? And he's only small. We can barely reach him. I think they sound really good. Not necessarily my first choice for recording in a studio because I like condensers, but they're a B tier microphone. Dave from the future here. Yeah, I screwed up. We don't actually use the D40s on toms anymore. And the dark side mix, we actually use the Sennheiser, I think it's the E904s on the toms. They're the mics we use, but we did used to use the D40s on the toms. So when I'm talking about how great the tom sound is on the dark side mix, it was actually the Sennheiser E904s, which are fantastic. And I don't think I rated them in the mic tier list video, but if I was going to, I'd put them top of B, maybe even bottom of A. So there we go. DPA 2028. This is the cheaper version of the, I think it's the 4018, the black hole of sound mic, as I described it earlier. And these are basically the same, but with a little bit less treble, in my opinion. Really, really horrible. They're going in the D list, slightly above the Rode mics. Fuck you, DPA, you deserve to be there. I don't like you. EVRE20. I really don't need to say too much about this microphone, other than the fact that it's a classic, and everything I've ever mixed where that microphone's been used sounds great. I remember the first time I ever saw one of those microphones was in a South Bank show episode back in probably 1997 or 1998 that had Blur on it. In fact, let's look when that was. 1999. Okay, 1999. So I was 2 or 1 year out, depending on which answer you want to take from me. But yeah, the first time I ever saw that mic ever was 1999, when I was just starting at the studio. I didn't really know what I was doing. And in that documentary, they were doing a song that became a B-side. And Damon's there with an acoustic, and he was singing into one of those. I thought, oh, that vocal sounded really nice. My friend Steve Lato, with his channel Lato's Law, he uses one of those for his voice to talk, because he used to use one of those in radio when he worked in radio. It sounds absolutely fantastic, even with his room reflections that people complain about.
I've been working with microphones for decades, and in fact, I got a whole collection of microphones behind me. But in front of me, I've got the Electro-Voice RE20. It's God's gift to broadcasting. In fact, it's so good, I've got 2 of them.
Other YouTubers I've watched used to use those and sounded great, and then they swapped them for a fucking SM7B, which do not sound anywhere near as good as that microphone. Yet, because they want to look like Joe fucking Rogan, they ditch their fucking RE20s and they get themselves an SM7B, which, let's face it, I'm going to cut through the bullshit here. It's a 57 with a different case and no transformer, right? If you're going to get, just get a 57. Save yourself a load of money. If you've got an EV, don't swap it for an SM7B. And another thing, I'm just going to have a little side rant here about SM7Bs, right? There's another channel I watch, I'm not going to name them. If you're going to get SM7Bs, they're for talking in too close, right? Don't get an SM7B and then put it up over there as a shotgun mic, right? They're not shotgun mics. If you want a distance mic, get one like I've got that's coming up next, right? But if you're going to get an SM7B, you need to talk into it, like eat the microphone. That's what they're designed for. That's why in Joe Rogan episodes, if you've ever watched him, he's saying to the other person, you know, pull that up to your mouth, get it close to your mouth, because I realise I'm sitting here doing this now, but that's the way an SM7B is meant to be used, is up close. To me, an SM58 or an SM57 with the little windshield attachment on top does an equally good job. Yeah, do they sound different? Absolutely, but not that much different. And it's nothing that's like, oh, well, one's clearly better than the other. They just sound a bit different. I do not get the fascination with SM7Bs in any way, but don't use them as a fucking shotgun mic. Because you've seen them on Joe Rogan, you think it's cool, but then the person on camera doesn't want it right up against their mouth. They use them like a shotgun. Just YouTubers that get the beautiful look of their cameras but have no idea about audio. Really winds me up. Really winds me up. So if you've got one of these EV mics, do not swap it for an SM7B, because these are amazing. And because I've just ranted like that, and I'm so annoyed so many people have swapped them out for cheaper or, in some cases, you know, expensive but shittier mics, I'm putting that in the S tier, because it deserves to be there, just because it's been dropped by people who are idiots. So I'm boosting your confidence back up.
That should end the conversation, but for some weird reason, people on the internet occasionally use the Shure SM7B, which makes no sense to me, considering the fact that the Electro-Voice RE20 exists. I don't know what you're thinking. It's the Electro-Voice RE20 for the win.
Swig of tea after that. Austrian Audio OC18. Great sounding mic. It's what the 414 should have been. Yeah, it's just a really good sounding mic. We use it on chimes, we use it on the ride cymbal live. We've used them in all sorts of places. We've used them on guitar amps before. But what a mic. Really, really good. That's going in the A tier. It's not going in the S tier, but it's going just below the TLM103. In fact, no, I'm going to put it above the TLM103. That's where it's going to go. It hasn't got enough history and enough love from me yet to replace 57s and 58s, but you never know. I don't actually own any of them. I only use them with the band, and I don't own that equipment. Yeah, if they wanted to give me a pair of them and I used them a lot, I might put them into the S tier. So, Sennheiser MD241s. These are classic tom mics. Loads of people use these on toms. I've never liked these on toms. I had a pair of them at Rogue Studios. I never liked them on toms. I always found that the tom sound was nice, but the spill sounded horrible. Yeah, I just didn't really like them. But I'll tell you where I did like them. Bass amps sounded great. Vocals. So if you're trying to get something that sounds a little bit vintage or a little bit punky, or you know you're going to be distorting the vocal a little bit, really saturating it. I mean, you could use a 57, you could use a whole host of other mics. The M88 is another good choice for a vocal like that. But this thing on a vocal sounds great. I really like them as vocal mics. I really like them on a bass guitar. They're all right on the guitars. I'm going to put these in the B list, even though I don't actually like them for what most people use them for. I've had so much success with them on vocals that they're going above the M88, I think. Yeah, let's put them there. Right, I had to look this mic up because I could not remember what the model of it was at all. An interesting side story here. I found photos of this mic, even though the model number was blurred. I found photos of us having these in the rehearsal rooms at Rogue Studios, and I didn't know what it was, and I chopped out the bit where the microphone was and put it into ChatGPT and said, can you tell me what this microphone is? And it came back with 3 possible options, and this was one of them, and it got it right. The Electro Voice EVPL11. And this was, I mean, it's a very old microphone. They're saying vintage, which makes me feel really old. These were kind of out in the 80s and early 90s. I think they were discontinued in about 97. When I first started rehearsing in Rogue before I bought it, and then when I first started working at Rogue, this was what they had in all the rehearsal rooms, just as the main vocal mics, and they sounded all right, actually. They sounded pretty good. There was a real smooth sound about them that I remember, because then we'd nick them out the rehearsal rooms every now and again to use on other things if we ran out of mics, particularly back in the early days when it was a 16-track studio, or it went from 8. I didn't work there when it was 8-track, but it was an 8-track and then 16-track and then 24 and then digital. And you know, maybe the mic inventory wasn't as good back in the late 90s as it became in the noughties, and we used to nick those mics out of rehearsal rooms to use on things, you know, like toms, or whack them on a guitar amp or around the Hammond or something like that, and they always did the job. They were never first choice, but they always did the job. I found a spec sheet. This is the original PDF. Well, it wasn't a PDF. It's been scanned obviously to a PDF, and this was the original kind of marketing blurb and spec sheet for them. Yeah, nice roll off in the bottom end, so you didn't get a load of plosives and stuff like that. They were good. They were decent sounding microphones, actually. I wouldn't say I ever reached for them first, but I think that's partly because they were always in use in the rehearsal room, so I couldn't reach for them. But yeah, no, they were good. I'm going to put them, I mean, you can't buy them anymore, so it's kind of irrelevant, but for their time and for the money, they were a B-tier microphone. No one was going to complain about those. Next up, we have the AKG C518. Now, we use these loads with Aussie Floyd. In fact, I think we're using them now, and I think we used to use them before as well, and I've mixed many a multi-track with Aussie Floyd using these mics, and these sound really, really, really good. They're better than the other ones that I put down in the C tier. They're better than these mics, the C418s, the 518s. They just sound great. They do really, really sound great. I'd quite like some of these as well, to be honest, but I think for recording I'd probably go, I don't know, because I've got the 418s, I might go for some of the D40s or the Sennheisers, just to have some extra tom mics. But no, I really like them. They're not A grade, they don't make my jaw drop, but they are really good. So they're going in the B tier somewhere. Yeah, I'm going to put them after the 58 Beta, before the Solidtube and before the Sennheiser. Right, next, AKG D7. For most of my Aussie Floyd career, these were our vocal mics. We went to the DPAs for a while because the sound crew liked them. I hated them. Steve, the owner, director, founder Aussie of the Aussie Floyd, he hated the DPAs as well. And then as a compromise, because various people didn't want to go back to the D7s because they said the background noise was too nasty, we ended up with 58s. So now we're all singing through SM58s. But I really like the AKG D7s. I never had a problem with them at all. They've got a lovely roll-off on the bottom end, so you don't get a lot of plosive noise. They're kind of already EQ'd to some degree for a voice. The top end sounds almost condenser-like. For vocals, they sound great. Do not use them on a guitar amp. Do not use them on a snare drum. They sound fucking awful. But for vocals, live, sound great. Now, I recorded, albeit a bit of a spoof album, I recorded an album where due to restrictions of me being able to get to certain equipment because it was the lockdown, I ended up doing all the vocals that were done at my place through one of those, and it matches up perfectly well with all the other stuff that was done on other posher microphones. And the Dark Side of the Moon mix that I was talking about earlier that we released on the Aussie Floyd channel, which I'll link below, all the vocals on that, because it was actually filmed and recorded back in 2023 before we went through the DPAs to the 58s. All the vocals were recorded on those live, and I think they sounded great. I had no problem mixing them. I had none of this background noise problem, and I heavily compressed the vocals in that mix and still didn't feel the need to really try. I mean, I trimmed out a lot of obvious noise where there wasn't singing. I wasn't leaving the mics open and the compression high, but I wasn't sort of trimming out between every line, you know, the half a second or whatever. I just left it in. And it sounded great. Really, really good mic. I'm going to put that up in top of B tier. Yeah, I prefer it to a 414. I mean, SE7's a different thing altogether, but it belongs to be, it deserves to be there. I've heard other people on YouTube really slagging them off and saying they don't like them, but proof's in the pudding. Everything I've used them live. They sound nice in my ears when I'm singing into them. I can hear the other members of the band well. And every time I've mixed a multi-track, I think I've done, don't know, tons of mixes from different years with different vocalists in Aussie Floyd. These just sound fantastic. Next up, the AKG D3800, 3800. I don't know how you pronounce that or how you would say that. We had one of these back at Rogue. In fact, even before I was working there, this was being used. And back in the days when it was an 8-track studio, John Paul didn't have a nice condenser mic to record vocals with. And for a while he was using either a 57 or a 58 to record the vocals in this 8-track studio, this small 8-track studio. And at some point he started changing to one of these. And I did a recording session with him and he put that up to do the vocals. And I went, oh, why are you using that one rather than the 58? And he went, oh, it sounds better, you know, it's got more X, Y, Z. But many years later when I started working there, and obviously the gear was much better and we'd gone 24-track and we moved the studio from the little room it was in to a much bigger room, he admitted to me he only put it on there because the 58 was obviously a 58, whereas if he put that on, it was like he made a choice because it sounded better, where in fact it was just to kind of cover up some of the embarrassment that he didn't have what he considered a proper studio vocal mic, and so he was just whacking that vocal mic in there because it was different. People didn't know about it, and yeah, particularly bands of my age and doing demos and stuff probably wouldn't question it. It was like, oh, he says it's really good, so we'll use it. But yeah, so I actually ended up using that a few times as a customer, and then I did end up using it a few times when I was on the engineering side of things, and it wasn't bad, but we only had one of them, so it wasn't like I was ever using them on anything where I'd need more than one mic, and I certainly wasn't using it for vocals. It was just one of those spare mics that was around, so never a first choice for me. Maybe if I got to know it a bit better, it would be in the B list. I'm going to put it in the C list because it's never a first choice, but certainly usable. Audio-Technica AT8035. That is a shotgun mic, long shotgun mic that also comes with this kind of foam cover thing. It comes in a very nice box that's like that, and as you know, I've got one of those mics. In fact, it's what's up now. It's what I'm talking into right now, is that shotgun mic. And I've just realised as I looked across to there and looked up at the camera that the light that's meant to be lighting me isn't on, so I've done this whole video without my key light on, which is very, very silly. So if this video looks shit, I'm not redoing it, I'm just going to touch it up in the edit. So if it looks shit, then it's because I forgot to put that light on. But back to the microphone. That microphone there is this microphone here. So yeah, I don't have huge knowledge of shotgun mics because they don't come up that often in a recording studio situation, but let me tell you a couple of three things actually. Number one, on my one here, when you twist the shotgun, the cover the windshield, if you twist it against it, to me it makes a sound that reminds me of Thomas the Tank Engine. So I did feature that in a previous video once before, but that does make me happy because I do like a bit of Thomas the Tank Engine. Right, second point, which is much more important point, the shotgunniness of it. I've just made up a word. The shotgunniness of it is really, really, really good. Okay, really good. I've been halfway down an arena. I was doing like a little mini documentary on the road documentary with one of my Blackmagic cameras, and I had that mounted to the top, and I was halfway down the arena. I think it was in Stuttgart, or was it Mannheim? I can't remember. Anyway, big arena. Halfway back filming some of our crew setting up the stage, and there was a couple of lampies having a conversation, and it was pointed directly at them, and there was no way I could hear what they were saying in the room. There were people putting out chairs behind me, a lot of noise in the room. When I listened back to that footage, I got every single word, and I even used a little bit of them laughing to each other in the documentary, and you could hear them clear as a whistle. So I think that is a testament to that it's good. Now, I'm not measuring this against anything else because I've never had any other serious shotgun mics, so that's not true. I've had two others, but I wouldn't call them serious. One of them was a cheap Rode one that broke, and another one was a Sony one that came with a Sony camera that did the job, but I haven't included it in this list because it was kind of like a thing that only comes with the camera. So this is my only real sort of shotgun mic that I'm still using and have used in any kind of anger for sort of run and gun documentary type stuff with the camera. It's really good. But the third thing of the couple of three things I wanted to say, I've used this in the studio for acoustic guitar. There are songs that I sometimes use as background music in this channel. Might have even played during this video. In fact, I'm almost certain one of them would be. I went through a phase, and I'm going to do it again, where I really liked recording acoustic guitar with that shotgun mic, where I'd have it, don't know, 2 meters away, pointing down at sort of, you know, the 12th fret position on the guitar, maybe sort of where the neck meets the body, somewhere like that. And you'd still get a really focused sort of close mic sort of acoustic sound, but it was rounder because the air had mixed it. You know, some of the transients were taken off, so it almost sounded like a really well mic'd, close mic'd guitar with some compression on it already. And obviously I didn't get loads of room tone, even though the room I was recording those bits in was not the most treated room in the world. It didn't seem to matter. It gave me a beautiful acoustic guitar sound, and that was a pure chance discovery because I had it up over a camera for doing some videos, a bit like I'm doing now. Because it was plugged into the desk and I had it there, and I was coming up with that, I thought I'll record my guitar with that. It's there, it's pointing down at me, and it was quite far away, but so I just hit record and used it and when I listened back I went, that acoustic sounds amazing. That's really good. And I went through a spate of doing that for quite a while. For some reason, because that mic got moved and was somewhere else, I had my TLM102, which I got out and used on the acoustic, and I've kind of used that since. And this video is reminding me I need to revisit that and kind of experiment with that a bit more, because I got some of the best acoustic tones where I hardly had to do any EQ and much less compression that I'd usually use on an acoustic using that mic. So I don't know other shotgun mics, so I might hear something else and go, oh wow, it's not that good. There are others that do it even better. And for that reason, I'm reluctant to put it in the A category, but I'm definitely putting it in the B category, and I'm putting it sort of around the middle. God, glad we're coming to an end. I need more tea. Okay, the OC818 by Austrian Audio. Wow. This microphone is wow factor. I have two of them. They're sitting in the background. You can see there's one there and there's another one over there. But there's two XLR outs on these. There's one by the main port and another one where you put an adapter in and put another XLR lead in. So you can record from both sides, and then you can use their polar pattern program designer plugin. So you can change the polar pattern in post. They sound as good as the OC18s, if not a bit better, but with so much more scope to do stuff with. And they're not cheap. I mean, they're $879, but actually for that price, I think they're absolutely worth it. I put them over a TLM103, which is a little bit cheaper, but not that much cheaper. Oh, that's a used one, so wow, maybe the Neumanns are more expensive, but it's just such an innovative mic. Not only did it push the boundaries of what microphones were doing, and the way it pushed those boundaries was really unique. You can see there the second lead plugged into the back for the second output, but they also executed it well. I often find that when people push the boundaries of what's possible in a field, they forget to actually make the product good. They come up with a really good idea and execute it badly, and then it takes 2 or 3 generations before it actually becomes an idea, and by then often another company have stolen the core concept and done a better job than them. But actually, this thing, the OC818, they are amazing. I've got an interview on my channel with a guy from Austrian Audio, Bernd. He's a lovely man. He came and brought me a pair of these backstage in Austria when I was playing a show out there earlier this year. But I've known them very well for years because we used them in Aussie Floyd. In fact, one of these, picking up from both sides, is what is above our drum kit live on stage to effectively get stereo overheads and the cymbals on the Dark Side of the Moon mix, which I'm banging on about because we've just released it and I'm really proud of it. The overheads and the cymbals and stuff are from this microphone, but wow, it just sounds absolutely amazing. It's one of the most usable mics. I remember doing some interviews with Adrian Hall, who used to work at Metropolis Studio. He's mixed some amazing things. He has a studio as well at home that he works out of doing mixing. And I went and interviewed him for Austrian Audio many years ago. If you've seen that video on their channel, it was me that made that. Yeah, he was talking about those. He was showing what you could do with the Polar Designer with the string section and with other orchestrations and stuff. It just sounded phenomenal. I was hooked at that time. Then we started using them with the band. In fact, I found out we were the first band to ever get one from Austrian Audio while they were still in beta, and we were using it live and giving them feedback. Now, I didn't know about that at the time because I'm just a musician in the band. I'm not part of the sound crew unless it's, you know, mixing stuff for YouTube and whatever like that. But obviously I'm on stage, so I'm not getting involved in the live sound. So I didn't know any of that at the time. Yeah, wow, what a microphone. Really good. And for that reason, it's going up. I'm putting it above a U87, but below the TLM102. And the reason it's below the TLM102 is because they are a lot more fragile. I've already indented the grill on mine because I'm a bit heavy-handed, a bit clumsy. And switching the buttons, I feel that I've got to be really fragile, really careful with them. They are a lot more fragile. The TLM102, as I said, I can whack that in a pencil case in a sock, chuck it in the back of my bag and carry it around for years, and that thing shows no signs of damage or dents or anything. The Austrian Audio ones would not. They'd not survive that, but you can get a pair of them like that in front of a drum kit and record each side, so you're getting every 90 degrees round, and put all 4 mics in their software and get every kind of sound you're looking for if you're recording a room. I mean, they're just stunning. So they are second to top of the S tier. I did promise I was going to make this video shorter than the last one. That was a promise to myself, but I haven't. So AKG C451B pencil condenser. These are good microphones. They're not jaw-dropping. They are really good microphones, kind of same kind of category as the Neumann 184s, but they're just a bit cheaper. Really nice microphone though. I'm putting those into the B tier because they're similar to the Neumanns but not as good, although they're above those other pencil condensers I was going to use. I'd probably use them for a lot of things over the 414, to be honest. I really don't like the 414s. I do prefer the SE7s. They've got more bottom end. There's something about the warmth on the bottom end of the SE7s, but you're not losing the top end, but you still get that bottom end on the SE7. So I'm going to put that third on the B tier. I'm questioning myself now. Let's get this wrapped up. Samson C02 pencil condensers. I have a pair of these that came with a drum mic set that was just kind of left somewhere. I certainly didn't buy it. I think it was band I was doing some front of house stuff back in probably like 2006, 2007. I mean, I haven't done front of house stuff for years. And I think it kind of got left with me, and then the band disbanded and no one said anything. And they're not great. They're usable. They're an emergency mic, aren't they? Yeah. Better end of the emergency mic. Yeah, I'm going to put them top end of the D tier, but still D tier microphone. Rode Classic. So yeah, I've got a Rode Classic. I've still got this, although the capsule is knackered. I would like to get that fixed. It was a good mic, a little bit toppy for my voice. I didn't like it on my voice, but I recorded many other singers when I had this working. I'm assuming that the K2 is sort of the up-to-date model of this, because they look very similar and do very similar things. The K2 is a phenomenal mic. I don't think the Rode Classic wowed me anywhere near as much as the K2 did, but it's a perfectly functional mic. Recorded Matt Bellamy through that, actually. It was called The Groove. It was a B-side to a single, and I think the vocals and the guitar were recorded at my studio, Rogue Studios, and I think Matt used that mic when he was doing the vocals there. So I'm gonna put that in the B tier. That's going B tier. Probably it's above a 414, or is it? Yeah, I'm going to put it above a 414. That's where it belongs. Samson Q-Snare, same as the Tom mic. Already done the Tom mic, so I'm going to just put it at the end there with the Tom mic. It's an emergency only mic. It's not a fail, but it's certainly not a pass. AKG 214. Now, I use two of these mics on my guitar amps live, and I've used them on all sorts of other things. I've recorded with them in the studio. I've obviously done tons of live gigs and mixed in post for video and whatever, the signals coming out of those. And it's not just my guitar amps that have used them. We've used them on many other instruments. I think at one point we were using them on the ride and the chimes before we got the Austrian audio stuff, maybe even overheads. I think we were using 414s back in the day for overheads, but we definitely had some of those around the kit. They are pretty magical. Recently I was kind of overhauling my guitar rig, and we were trying out other mics and A-Bing them, and the 214s really won. The only mics that I didn't A-B them against, which I wanted to and didn't get time to do it, was my TLM102s. I wanted to have a shootout between them, because I love the TLM102s on guitar amps. But in the shootout that I did, which was very recent, it was only a month or so ago, the AKG 214s still stood up as the best guitar amp mic out of the lot that I had there, and that was including 57s and DPAs, and there was a Neumann U87 there as well, but we only had one, so I was testing in mono on that particular sound. But yeah, they are, I wouldn't say they're jaw-dropping, but they're still, it was the best sound. I don't know. I don't get wowed by them. It's not like I think about the mic and go, oh wow, I can't wait to record something with that. But actually for guitars, they sound great. But I wouldn't want to use them on vocals. It's got to go in the A tier though, just because it did win the shootout against some other classic mics. And the 57's in there, and the 57 still sounded good, but the 57 kind of, as I said, is that 95% good at everything. So the 214, yeah, I'm putting it up there, end of the A category. It could be a top B, but it's actually end of A. Shure SM48, not an SM58, but an SM48. I actually have two of these. I have no idea where I got them from. I think at some point in Rogue Studios, because towards the end of my tenure there, we had all 58s in the rehearsal rooms. And I've got a feeling that some point at the end of my tenure there were bands coming in with these 48s and swapping them for 58s, hoping we wouldn't notice, and clearly we didn't, because I've ended up with two SM48s, which I didn't even know existed until I went through my mic bag a few years ago and found them and thought, what are these? And I've done some A/B tests and they don't sound bad at all. There's a bit more handling noise, but they don't sound bad at all. I mean, I'd use them if I had to. They wouldn't be my first choice, but I'd use them if I had to. I'm going to put them down here in the same sort of category as the Sennheiser. In fact, I'm going to bring this down a little bit above the bass drums as well. because I really don't like those bass drum mics. Right, next on the list, Rode NT2, and I'm not talking about the NT2As, the new ones and all of that. I'm talking about the old NT2. These ones here, the original NT2s. I had 2 of these at the studio, and they were great mics. If I didn't have a Neumann, or I didn't have a 414 or something like that, don't know what happened to them, to be honest. I have no memory of ever losing them. Maybe they broke, maybe someone nicked them. I genuinely have, I mean, I was there for so many years, and there's a lot I don't remember. I just think these new ones, the NT2As, they're just so ugly. I just couldn't buy one of these microphones based on how ugly it is. That front plate thing there is just so ugly compared to that. That just looks so beautiful and elegant. I'm falling in love with them, looking at them again. But that's only compared to that. That looks really ugly to me, the new ones. But the NT2, going back to the tier, that is a good B-list microphone. Perfectly usable, perfectly good. It's better than the NT1As or the LD Systems that I put in the C list, which I'd use after I'd pick my favourite ones. But the NT2s I'd actually use out of choice because I thought they were fairly good microphones. I'm going to put that after the SE7s and before these AKGs, because I used them a lot and they were really nice. This is funny. This is a Prologue, Shure Prologue 10L. When I was very young, I think I was 13, and I went to Maplin's and I bought a pair of these so that I could record my voice and record my guitar, mic up a guitar amp into my 4-track, my Tascam Porta 1. So it was running unbalanced, using XLR to jack into my Tascam Porta 1. And the frequency response of them heavily drops off after 10k, but then again I would say the same about my even Type 4 cassettes that were in my Tascam. And they really did the job for me at the time, but in retrospect they were very shit sounding microphones. They were not nice sounding. The moment I actually got some real 58s and I started using real 58s instead of the Prologue, I then found out what a nice sounding mic was and realised that they were horrible. Saying that, I did use them out of choice when I was 16 and I had a setup with a couple of ADATs, and I was miking my guitar amp in the bathroom, get that bathroomy reverb sound. But the close-up mic that I had on the guitar amp at the time, I think I did have a 58. I was trying the 58 against that, and I think because that has that cut off at 10k, for the time when I was 16 going through the gear I had, that actually works better on the guitar amp than a 58 did. But I didn't have much in the way of decent EQ. It was like 3-band EQ on whatever desk I had, and some. I think I only had one compressor as outboard. I can't even remember what compressor it was. Might have been an Alesis 3630. Yeah, that sounded pretty nice on guitar. At that age, for my setup when I was 16, I don't remember what happened to them. I probably lost them somewhere and didn't care because they were so cheap. But when I was 13, that was a great microphone. It really would be an emergency only mic now. But I'm going to put it above these shitty Q-Tom and Q things. I think it's probably sort of worse than the DPAs that I hate, but better than those things. Final one, you've made it through. If you're with me in the video, thank you very much. Please comment and let me know you made it this far. Pair of vintage realistic tape recorder mics. Realistic, I think, was a Tandy brand. These are from the either early 80s or the late 70s. My grandma and granddad had a pair of these in their cupboard that connected to their hi-fi system, and they never used them, but they probably just came with it. I used them when I was really young, just to plug them into a little tape deck and make silly pretending to be radio stations with my dad. So much nostalgia looking at those. I mean, they, even back then, I could tell, even back then, even at 7 years old, in fact, here we go. It's all coming back to me now. I started programming when I was very young. I used to program on an Acorn Electron, and then I got a BBC Micro. And I used to make these VHSs where I'd set up one of those microphones and I'd sit cross-legged on the floor in the front room, have the output go to my VHS of the computer and the VHS to the TV, so I could see the computer on the TV. And I used to have one of those microphones, and I used to talk through, pretty much like I'm doing now, instead I'm talking to a camera, but I used to talk through whatever I was doing in programming and record the screen. And then I'd take them into school for people who were interested, and they would go home and try and learn bits about BBC Basic or Acorn Basic off these VHS tapes that I couldn't edit. It was a one-take thing, and my voice was recorded with one of those microphones. I can't remember that I did that many of those videos. I think I did 2 or 3 and gave up, but YouTube didn't exist in 1987. And neither did the World Wide Web. But that was my first go, I suppose, at doing YouTube videos. So when I'm sitting here explaining something and I've got a screenshot and I'm explaining something in audio and you can hear my voice, I'm basically doing what I was trying to do at 7 years old, only back then I was doing it with Basic on an Acorn Electron. But I used these microphones to do it, and even back then, 7 and 8 years old, I could hear how bad they sounded. My only reference point was Monty Python. I used to love watching the Monty Python film, and now for something completely different. And I loved the tone in John Cleese's voice when he's doing the how to defend yourself against a person, armed with a piece of fresh fruit sketch. And when he'd go, "Next, I eat the banana," and he'd kind of shout at them and he'd fire the gun, and there was such a distortion, whatever boom mic they were using to record the audio for that film just distorted in such a pleasant way. And I remember at 7 years old, and I'm certain it was around that age, I might have been 8, but I certainly wasn't much older than that, listening to that microphone with my voice, my squeaky little voice as an 8-year-old, talking on that, going, why doesn't it distort like John Cleese's mic distorts in the Monty Python film? So even back then, I was being discerning about audio. It's quite odd, actually, thinking about it, why I got here doing this. So I was making the equivalent of YouTube videos, and I was getting really detailed about the sound of things, detailed for a 7-year-old. But yeah, that was the microphone. I'm tangenting, but it all just suddenly flooded back to me there while I was talking. So yeah, these microphones, they sounded fucking horrible, but I loved them. I mean, I was 7, so I could just hear my voice back. So F tier, I'm afraid. Much as I'm putting the bass drum mic after it, but yeah, you just couldn't use them on anything professional at all. For what they were made for at the time, for kids to mess around with, great. But there are things that you can buy for like £5, for doing like karaoke singing for kids or whatever, that are better than that. They're not good in any way, shape or form. But that doesn't mean I don't love them, and I'm just telling that story there, remembering that. And I hadn't prepared that. Some of these bits that I do think about before I think, I remember to say that when I'm doing the video. But with this particular example, with those mics and the doing the VHS recording, that really came back to me sitting on the floor in the front room with the Acorn Electron trying to do that. So I must have been 7 because it was the Acorn Electron. There we go. Trip down memory lane for me. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please like it, and also consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, and consider leaving me a comment. In fact, the comment is really good because it was the comments off the last video that made me want to do this one. So leave me comments. I love comments, and I try and answer all of them. My YouTube success is small enough that I can still respond to all of you. So thank you very much. Leave me a comment. Please share the video with anyone you think would like it. And I got a comment on my last video saying, nice South Park t-shirt, by the way. I'm not wearing it today, but very proud that I wore that in the last video because I've been missing them. They haven't had a show on for a while because of all the Paramount business and everything like that. But they came back last night. I watched the episode. I think it went out in America the night before. Last night I watched Series 27, Episode 1 of the new South Park. Wow. If you haven't seen it, wow. Wow, wow, wow. I'm speechless over that episode. Wow. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. And it made me proud that I'd worn my South Park t-shirt a few days before in the video, because I was wondering when we were going to get some South Park, and man, have we got some South Park. So if you're a South Park fan, go and check that out. See you in another video. Goodbye.